They left us out there to die. That's what our government wanted. That's what Israel wanted. They wanted to bring us into World War III.
On June 8, 1967, the USS Liberty, a U.S. Navy research vessel, a spy ship, was stationed in international waters off the coast of the Sinai Peninsula when, without warning, the ship came under attack by fighter jets and torpedo boats, resulting in the death of 34 American servicemen and leaving another 171 critically wounded. But the most shocking detail? The attack was launched by America's closest ally in the region, Israel. This is a story you've probably never heard of before. And if you have heard of the USS Liberty, the story you've been told is probably not what really happened. In the week following the attack on the Liberty, the U.S. Navy Court of Inquiry launched a swift investigation, which lasted just 7 days, with a report concluding that the incident was a tragic case of mistaken identity. Israel quickly issued an apology claiming that they had confused the Liberty with an Egyptian vessel. The official narrative was set, and with the Six-Day War ending in a decisive victory for Israel, establishing the then young nation as a new dominant powerhouse in the Middle East, leaders from both nations, including President Lyndon Johnson and Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, were eager to put the incident behind them. Yet, for the veterans of the Liberty, many questions and doubts lingered, and thus began 57 years of hell, where they were silenced, threatened, cast aside, and abandoned by the very country they dedicated their lives to serving. Now, before we go any deeper, I just first off want to say I'd learned nothing of this sort in school. The attack on the Liberty isn't even a footnote in any history course, let alone a blurb. And secondly, a case of mistaken identity, a sham investigation, something's not adding up here. So to piece together the history of what really happened, I recently sat down with Phil Turney, a U.S. Navy petty officer aboard the USS Liberty, a survivor of the attack, and the president of the USS Liberty Veterans Association. And boy, you better buckle up, because as you're about to discover, the Liberty's absence from school textbooks and the media is likely no accident, as the true story, allegedly, is so much darker than you could ever imagine. The Six-Day War of 1967 forever reshaped the Middle East, solidifying Israel's position as a dominant military power in the region. But the lead-up to this conflict was marked by intense geopolitical maneuvering and escalating tensions, including the threat of the Soviet Union joining the conflict on the side of the Arab nations. During this period, U.S. foreign policy was also shifting. President Kennedy had maintained a balanced approach in the Middle East, supporting Israel while trying to remain neutral. But after his assassination, President Lyndon Johnson took a much stronger stance in favor of Israel. In a now famous quote, Johnson told an Israeli diplomat, quote, "You have lost a very great friend, but you have found an even better one." And on the eve of the Six-Day War, the United States sent one of its most advanced Navy research vessels, the USS Liberty, commanded by Captain William McGonigal, to international waters off the coast of the Sinai Peninsula. Officially, its mission was intelligence gathering. But some aboard the ship allege there was a far more sinister plan at play.
James, we were deliberately sent there. All the ships were going one way. We were the only ones going that way. We were sent there by the Johnson administration in collusion with the Israeli government to sink that ship and blame it on the Arab states.
On May 30th, 1967, just 10 days before Israel's attack on the USS Liberty, General Mir Admit, the head of Mossad, the Israeli equivalent of the CIA, flew to Washington, D.C. for a series of secret meetings. The first person he went to see was James Angleton, then the CIA's head of counterintelligence. He then went to meet with CIA boss Richard Helms, and then finally a meeting with Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense.
I told him, look, we don't want even one soldier from you. All what we want from you to stop the Russian coming into the arena, and number two, to help us after the war. So when I finished, he asked me two questions. One, how long it will take? I said 1 week. How many casualties? I told him less than the War of Independence. So I asked him, Mr. Secretary, what do you advise to me? Can I go home now? Or stay here until things will clear up? He said, no, you go home, your place is there now. I drew the conclusion that it was a green light.
Amit also said that McNamara consulted President Johnson several times during their conversation, so there was no doubt he was fully informed. Fully informed of what? That is the critical question.
Eshkol and LBJ and their cronies together had a tight-fisted group that said, let's get this going. This attack was probably planned a year in advance.
Jim Ennis, an officer aboard the USS Liberty, later found evidence, meeting minutes dated from April 1967, from a secret group called the 303 Committee that revealed the Liberty was part of a larger plan, codenamed Cyanide, devised by Israeli and American intelligence to invade Egypt and overthrow its government.
Operation Cyanide was a joint Israeli-American venture using submarines and other covert-type intelligence gathering efforts against the UAR.
There was nuclear aircraft, SAC airplanes, on their way to Cairo, even before we got attacked.
In his book Operation Cyanide, investigative journalist Peter Hunem recounts a chilling story from the early hours of June 8, 1967. Jim Nanjo, a U.S. Air Force pilot stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California, was abruptly awakened between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. by blaring klaxons. He and his fellow aircrew quickly scrambled to their B-52 bombers, reportedly armed with thermonuclear bombs, and were ordered to wait at the end of the runway for further instructions. They remained there for what he said was 4 to 6 tense hours, awaiting a potential go code that could have sparked World War III. Finally, a coded message ordered them to stand down, and the emergency was over. However, Hunem noted something strange. The klaxons had sounded between the hours of 2 to 4 a.m., before the USS Liberty was attacked at 5 a.m. California time, suggesting that the U.S. military and President Johnson had knowledge of the impending attack on the Liberty. Meanwhile, back in the Mediterranean, the Liberty was under a deadly assault by Israeli fighter jets and torpedo boats. A declassified CIA document from November 1967, still partially censored, is quoted as saying the then Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan personally ordered the attack on the ship, and that one of his generals adamantly opposed the action and said, "This is pure murder." In 2017, Israeli newspaper Haaretz published transcripts proving that the Israeli pilots were aware the Liberty was an American ship. This is an American ship. Do you still want us to attack? Yes, follow orders. But sir, it's an American ship. I can see the flag. Never mind, hit it. Whew, that sounds pretty definitive there. I mean, I do not know how you could still claim the attack was an accident. While the ship was getting bombarded, the crew of the Liberty desperately tried to send distress signals for help. The 6th Fleet, stationed nearby, received the calls and immediately scrambled rescue planes to aid the beleaguered ship. But inexplicably, no planes ever arrived.
Captain Kelly, a friend of mine, he became a good friend. He's passed on now. He said, we sent our aircraft off. They were called by Washington from McNamara. Even before they hit the horizon, they were called back. That quick. They sent another volley up after it reconfigured, and then Johnson got on the phone. He says, you better turn those GD planes around. I don't care if every sailor on that ship gets hurt or whatever, killed, but they left us out there to die. That's what our government wanted. That's what Israel wanted.
But by the grace of God, the Liberty did not sink, and the crew, many badly injured, many dead, limped to the nearest US port in Malta. I just want to pause and quickly acknowledge our brains have been pre-wired to reject a story like this, a crazy alleged conspiracy at the highest level of both the US and Israeli government to deliberately sacrifice US servicemen and leave them for dead, because if this story were to be true, it would necessarily lead one to question other events in history that we know to be fact, because the government, they would never lie to us, right?
It was a complete cover-up from day one. I mean, day one, it was covered up. And it's still covered up 57 years later.
In the days after the attack, the surviving crew of the Liberty was greeted by Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd, who was in charge of the official investigation. Only except, according to Turney, there were certain facts the Admiral apparently didn't want to include.
We were boarded by Captain Ward Boston and Admiral Isaac Kidd. The Admiral came in through the stars on the table, stainless steel table there. He says, "Talk to me just like I'm your dad." You know, it was great because it was a great relief for me, I thought. And we all told him our story, and I told him exactly what I saw, what I thought. I told him about the torpedo boats getting shot up. You know, napalm dropped on our ship and everything like that. I mean, he could see it, he knew it. And he looked at me and he says, "Listen," he put his stars back on. He says, "Listen, don't you ever breathe a word to anybody about that. Or you, many of the guys got fines, but he told me fines, imprisonment, or worse."
Worse? Whoa. The only official investigation conducted by the US Navy Court of Inquiry, released less than 2 weeks after the initial attack, ignored much of the testimonies given by the Liberty crew and concluded that, quote, "available evidence combines to indicate that the attack on the Liberty on the 8th of June was in fact a case of mistaken identity." The New York Times ran a report about the attack on June 9th, but much of that article was buried on page 19. After the Liberty returned to the US, it was quietly decommissioned and sold for scrap. The crew members who continued their naval service were reassigned, but never together. Captain McGonigal was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, but in secret at the Washington Navy Yard by the Secretary of the Navy, rather than at the White House by the President. This represents the only time a Medal of Honor recipient was awarded in such a manner. Those who left the military were threatened and coerced into silence for decades.
I'm in San Diego. My wife and I are at the bar getting a drink, waiting for a table. This guy comes up next to me. He says, "Oh, you were on the USS Liberty." I says, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" He says, "I know." And he had a watch, big, like a camera watch. He had it right in my face. I said, "Hey, but get that thing out of my face, you know." And you just tell me the best thing to do about the Liberty is, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. I said, "Who are you, Mossad?" He says, "Yeah." So yeah, that's intimidation as far as I see it. Was he really Mossad, or was he really wasn't? It didn't matter to me. I got the message.
But after many years, the captain of the Liberty, William McGonigal, shortly prior to his death, in a speech at Arlington National Cemetery, finally broke his silence about the Liberty.
For many years, I had wanted to believe that the attack on the Liberty was pure error. It appears to me that it was not a pure case of mistaken identity. I think that it's about time that the State of Israel and the United States government provide the crew members of the Liberty and the rest of the American people the facts of what happened and why it came about that the Liberty was attacked 30 years ago today.
And fast forward, it's been another 25 years since, with no investigation to speak of. All right, some will say these are all conspiracy theories. Some will say this is dangerous discussion. Some will even call this anti-Semitism, a double standard placed on Israel. But I say this is supposed to be a journey to the truth, because to be fair, as many facts as I've presented today about the attack on the Liberty, an equal number of troubling questions remain. For example, why was the attack abruptly called off? What other covert operations were there that were linked to Project Cyanide? And were we really minutes away from nuclear war? So I asked Phil, why in the past 57 years has there not been a thorough investigation into what really happened to the Liberty in June of 1967?
James, I'm glad you asked me that. Our country has been in that position for a long time. Israel has led us around by the nose with money. They got more money murdering American on the high seas than they ever got in their life. So our country, our government doesn't do anything because their hands are tied. You know, they won't believe. That's why Congress won't let us in, because they want to be embarrassed. Our politicians are nothing but bought, paid for whores by the AIPAC. They're part of cold-blooded murder for hiding this. All of them are guilty of it.
The Israel lobby, led by groups like AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is a powerful force in U.S. politics, ensuring strong support for Israel through lobbying, campaign contributions, and media influence.
The security of Israel and the United States is inextricably tied, and we will never, ever, ever abandon Israel out of our own self-interest.
This widespread and powerful influence helps shape U.S. foreign policy and often suppresses criticism of Israel, and could explain why some sensitive issues, like the attack on the USS Liberty, may not receive the scrutiny they deserve in Washington.
Our country deserves the truth of what two countries can do to one. Our country can't have two masters. It just can't happen. But that's what's going on right now. It happened in '67, and it's been that way ever since. I just want people to listen, man. This is our country, and you need to help us, please.
I am not saying anything about the Liberty, period.
That is it for me this week. I want to thank Phil Turney for his courage, his time, his continued dedication to seeking truth and justice for his fellow shipmates. And there is something we can do to directly help him. In the video description below, there is a link that will lead you to instructions and a template form that you can use to send a letter to your representatives to advocate for Congress to launch a full inquiry to investigate the USS Liberty incident before it's too late. It'll just take a couple minutes, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to veterans like Phil. If you want to support my work, please take a second to like this video and share it with just one person. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and hit that notification bell. As always, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.